Can we thank our choir again for their hard work and their beautiful music? And they'll come back in the end with one more very different style of song than they've been doing to close out our service. Can you hear me all right? Okay. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The Lord is my shepherd, I can let go. This psalm is important in the life of the church. I can't tell you how many times I have whispered it into those transitioning from this life to the next. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. This psalm is meaningful for so many. It may not be meaningful for you. Maybe you didn't grow up with it. I memorized it when I was 5, so it's been with me my whole life. But maybe you're new to the faith. Maybe you didn't grow up with that psalm. You know, Silicon Valley is a long way from the sheep and shepherds of the olden days. So that metaphor, that language, that form may not hold meaning for you. So if it doesn't, what is your metaphor? God is my what? And I could let go. Or maybe you don't use the word God. I know that some of you in this room don't. So how would you say it? What holds you? For some, the Lord is my shepherd. Even when I walk through, you anointed table, that holds you. But for some here, it doesn't. So what does? How do you describe it? The language in itself is not sacred. Are you with me on that? Right? And our language is constantly changing. Ann Lee and I have been together 26 years. And I was going to say I've called her many things over the years, but that didn't sound quite right. But for many years I called her my partner, because marriage wasn't legal. Now I call her my spouse. And when I get telemarketing calls, and they say, Mrs. Nixon, can I talk to you about this so-and-so bill? I just say, because I don't want to talk to them, I'm sorry, I don't handle the finances in our family. And then they say, well, is your husband home? And I always say, yes, I'll get her. Never miss the opportunity to make a point is my motto. The language changes. But what that language points to, however much it changes, it points to my covenantal relationship of trust that I have. I can depend on her not because I call her this or that, but because of my experience over time of our relationship. Faith is a trust relationship. It does not depend on what you do or do not call God. However you think of God. Now, you've heard me say that many times. God, however you think of God. I add that because I mean it. Because our concept of God may have changed dramatically over time. You see, letting go of certainty has everything to do with faith, with a faith relationship with trust. Now notice that I am not using the word belief, because belief and faith are different, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But first, let's check in about our own relationship to certainty. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, how high is your need to know? How high is your need for certainty? Got a number in mind? There's one person that gave me a 10. The one honest person in the room just gave me a 10. In general. Okay? Now, how about when it comes to the future? Where you will live, how you will be employed? Does that number change? How about how your children will be if you're a parent? I don't know about you, but my number just went up a little bit. How about how much money you'll have when you retire, or even next week? How about your health? So in what areas do you have the most difficulty letting go of certainty? Because that is the area where you and I will have an opportunity to practice trust and faith. Because letting go of certainty is all about faith. Because the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. So really take that in. We've talked about it before. We can't say it enough. The opposite of faith is certainty. What are all fundamentalisms in all different religions based on? Certainty. Michael Krasny, the host of KQED's forum, writes a book called Spiritual Envy. And in that book, he identifies himself as an agnostic, but this is his definition of being an agnostic: non-acceptance of all forms of dogmatic certainty. It sounds a little bit like a certainty kind of sentence to me, but besides that, agnostic, non-acceptance of all forms of dogmatic certainty. I imagine by that definition, there are many agnostics in the room. At least as I listen to your stories and as we have conversations. Because there's a difference between belief and faith. Belief, or to believe, has come to mean that I believe, I mentally assent to creeds or faith statements. A number of you have said to me over the years, I don't know what I believe about God. And I have a lot of people that I run into, whether it's I'm traveling or I'm at the grocery store and conversations open up. People always ask me what I do, and I always have to hesitate a moment to see whether or not I'm going to tell them. Because it's either going to be a very short conversation or a very long one. But often people will say to me, well, I don't believe in God. Well, that may be true, but I would contend when people say that, they often mean they don't believe in the notion of God, of how God has been described over the last century or so. And I think many of us are in between those worlds. I just want to speak into a reality for a moment. Many of us are in between worlds of one kind of definition and thought of God that we can't quite get with. But we know in our experience there's something else, but we haven't quite named it yet. Am I speaking to anybody's reality here? Belief and faith are different. Belief has come to mean a set of mental assents. But faith is a relational trust. Beliefs are inherited. Faith is experienced. And I think that's why so many people say today, I'm spiritual, but I'm not. They're not religious because maybe the beliefs that they have inherited don't make sense for them anymore. But they haven't given up on the notion of mystery or of trust or of some relationship with however they name that relationship that is greater than them. In fact, someone told me yesterday, I was so moved by this, someone who grew up in this church, who went away to college. A long conversation yesterday. And this person said, you know, when I went to college, I wasn't sure what I believed. I grew up in the church, and the church meant a lot to me, but I wasn't quite sure. And I explored other things, and I have really come now to choose this Christian path. It's for me. And that gives me a lot of strength and hope. I thought that was one of the most beautiful things I'd heard in a while. Because it wasn't this person's inherited belief system. They questioned that. And rightly so. But what they did was be courageous enough to go on a journey of their own self and their own exploration. And they came to a relational trust following the Christian way. It's what I want all our young people to do. I want them to go off and test out what they've learned here. Sometimes we have to walk away from something so that then we can make it our own. Belief and faith are different. I've been reading a book called The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. Many of you know her. She's done great TED Talks. This book really is about how to engage our lives from a place of worthiness and wholeheartedness. And as she interviewed literally thousands of people, she says this, I can't tell you how many times I've heard the terms having faith and my faith in interviews with men and women who are living the wholehearted journey, those who really inspired her. At first, I thought that faith meant there's a reason for everything. And I personally struggled with that because I'm not comfortable with using God or faith or spirituality to explain tragedy. It actually feels like substituting certainty for faith when people say there's a reason for everything. But I quickly learned from the interviews that faith meant something else to these people. And here's how I define faith based on the research. Faith is a place of mystery where we find the courage to believe in what we cannot see and the strength to let go of our fear of uncertainty. Isn't that beautiful? And I thought, well, good Lord, that's exactly what the scriptures say. Right from Hebrews 11, chapter 11, verse 1. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction or the confidence of things not seen. That's exactly what she realized as she talked to all these people about how they thought about faith and who were living wholehearted, inspirational lives. She also says, I love this from theologian Richard Rohr. My scientist friends have come up with things like principles of uncertainty and dark holes. They're willing to live inside imagined hypotheses and theories, but many religious folks insist on answers that are always true. We love closure, resolution, and clarity while thinking that we are people of faith. How strange, he says, that the very word faith has come to mean its opposite. If you are needing more certainty in your life, maybe what you really are longing for is a deeper faith. Because letting go of our need to know, letting go of certainty, letting go of what will be next, how will this turn out? I've got something going on in my own life that I want to know, how is it going to turn out? See, the voice of the divine right in the middle of the service. I have to turn it over. I have to let go. And that takes relational trust that I am held in this situation, however it turns out. You see, as a Christian, when I say I follow Jesus, hear me really clearly, please. When I say I follow Jesus, I don't mean that I believe in Jesus to save me. I believe. What I mean is, I try to live the life of faith that Jesus lived so that I might have communion with God. His relationship with God guided his every action. He had trust even in the most difficult situations, saying, "Not my will, but your will be done." That's the kind of life that I want to lead. Modeling my life after his life of faith and communion with God and how he lived that out in every action. I'll close with this. Melba Pattillo Beals was one of the Little Rock Nine. She's just written a book that's come out called March Forward Girl. She reflects on her life under Jim Crow and of the experience of being one of the nine. Some of the horrors and terrors that she mentioned in her interview on KQED, I couldn't even say from this pulpit. I'd be afraid to actually traumatize some of you in the room by speaking some of the horrors that she lived through. She said, "My grandmother told me all the time, 'You're equal. You are equal. God has your picture on his refrigerator.'" Her grandmother told her that again and again. Was that her reality in the world? Absolutely not. Day in and day out, it was not. Does God really have a refrigerator? Does it matter? That was her metaphor. I am equal because God has my picture on his refrigerator. And though her everyday experience was absolutely contrary to that of being equal, she held on to faith. And people ask her in interview after interview after interview, "Why do you have so much faith in God after what you've gone through?" And she says, "Because it's the only thing I have." It's a relational trust. It's not a set of beliefs. It's not that she gets up and reads the Nicene Creed every morning. It's a relational trust that she's held. And that no matter what, she will not be alone. So whether the Lord is your shepherd or something else, however you describe it, the end of the psalm, there's one note of certainty. Surely, certainly, love will follow me all the days of my life. And that's what faith is all about. Amen.